Welcome to Journey In, a show that aims to offer you new and expanding perspectives when it comes to defining your spirituality. These days, more and more of us are craving a deeper connection to something bigger than ourselves. I created this show to not only share about my personal journey, but to create a space to have conscious conversation around different spiritual modalities, health and wellness trends, and to hear from spiritual thought leaders so that we can come together and respect one another despite our spiritual beliefs and differences. At the end of the day, a spiritual journey is a homecoming to who you really are, and you get to define what that path looks like. It can be messy, hard, and confusing. We're going to journey through it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jess Montasia, and let's journey in. Okay, Analena, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, Jess. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I'm so excited for this conversation today because my listeners are very familiar with True Sidereal Astrology, but I have not yet introduced them to the concept of, or the fact that the human design chart changes when you pull from True Sidereal Astrology rather than tropical astrology. So I'm just really excited to introduce them to that in this conversation today. But I wanted to get started just with how we connected, because one day I was reading Athen Kementi's, founder of Mastering the Zodiac. I was reading his newsletter, and I actually don't read it all the way through all the time. But for some reason on that day, I read it all the way through. And at the end, he introduced you and mentioned that you were hosting the True Sidereal Summit. And I was like, what is this? I need to attend. And it was literally happening like the next week. So it just felt, I was like, okay, of course, I was supposed to find that. And so that's how I discovered your work. And then I attended the True Sidereal Summit, which was just such an amazing online virtual event that you hosted and you put together. And, you brought together practitioners from tropical astrology, True Sidereal Astrology, human design. It just really felt like a merging of both worlds, because I know that can be, it can sometimes be like tropical versus True Sidereal. And you brought a really, really unifying perspective to the two that I really appreciated. And it really opened my mind. And then I booked a human design reading with you all around my True Sidereal human design chart. And now here we are.
Yes, it's so amazing how the synchronicities brought us together, right? I love it too.
Yeah, so I'm super excited, and I would love to start with your own personal journey. What led you to working with human design, the gene keys, and astrology in the first place?
Yeah, so as a coach, that's what I call myself after I left the corporate world. I felt I was always searching for something. You know, when you always feel like, I'm missing something. Some people have figured out something, but I haven't. And I was really looking for answers outside of myself for the most part. And it was very frustrating. Even led me to the point where I thought, well, maybe I'm not cut to be an online entrepreneur, or this whole coaching thing. Maybe it's just a fluke. But then one day, one of my friends, we also had met through some of the coaching programs. She told me like, hey, I found this thing, human design. You know, we always shared new things with each other. And every time I talk about it, it was this moment where something was just different, because just seeing my chart at the time, and it was a tropical chart, it was almost 5 years ago now, where I was like, oh my God, there is something so unique here. And when I started to read about it, I started to realize, oh, wow, I'm actually different than other people. You know, just this one concept, because I had unconsciously bought into the idea that what works for other people has to work for me, or there's something wrong with me. I think many people can relate to that. And human design in itself was just this invitation of like, hey, you're super unique. You're actually meant to be different. You're not here to follow the crowd. And obviously there were certain things in the chart. At that time, in Tropical, I'm a 2-4 manifesting generator. And just this permission slip that, hey, it's okay to have multiple passions, because in the entrepreneurial space, there's often the talk about niching down and you have to be super specific and just pick one thing. And it was always against my true nature. And that's when I absolutely started to love all about human design, because it started to take away all these limitations that, again, I had taken them on, right? It's not to blame other people, but I had because again, I was projecting solutions on other people for me externally. And then all of a sudden, I felt so like this weight dropped off my shoulders. I could relax into my body and oh my gosh, I can just do what I want and I'm going to do it my way. And I felt this sense of freedom. And it was such a profound shift that I immediately felt this strong inner calling to, okay, if this is so deeply profound for me, especially after I had invested so much time, energy, and a lot of money into solutions that were more for the masses, or that were maybe working for somebody, but it wasn't uniquely customized to who I was. It's like, oh my gosh, I think there's lots of people that feel the same, and I just have to get this to my clients, And then, long story short, I followed already my gut feeling sequel, what human design teacher I was drawn to. It was Karen Parker at the time, and I didn't even blink with an eye. I signed up for her certifications. Took all 4 levels, and it was definitely interesting because it came very, very easy to me. So there was this sensation of I'm really meant to do this.
Mm.
Because it's easy to get excited about something and oh my God, now I need to teach this. But it was very different with human design. And it came very, very quickly to me. And I started to actually give readings quickly, share with my clients. It was super transformative. And honestly, I never looked back.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And it is I had a similar experience because I'm also a manifesting generator in tropical. And so
Mm.
the multi-passionate, being able to do multiple things, that was probably also the most liberating thing
Yeah.
for me. So were you always working with the gene keys as well, or did you find that after?
Great question. So in the beginning, I did hear very shortly after about the gene keys, and I actually got the book. But I have to be honest, it was way too complex for me. It was too poetic at the time. I actually returned the book because I was I don't want to have it just on my bookshelf and get dusty, because I wasn't ready for it. And then it
Yeah.
was, I think, about a year after that Richard Rudd was attending a conference. It was the Human Design Conference, the online version, because it was during COVID at the time,
Mhm.
that Karen Parker put on, and Richard Rudd was one of the speakers. And I won an entry. I didn't even sign up for it. So it was kind of and I
Oh, of course.
only wanted to listen to him. That was my only interest. And I think I don't remember watching anything else. I was there and I listened to his presentation. And I was just so fascinated because he talked about his journey, how he met Ra and the whole evolution and all the gene keys. And I was just oh my God, I think right then and there, I ordered the book again. And then it was so different. It started to click. I actually started to really understand the gene keys. And what was very interesting, I had already, when I dove into human design, as I was following my inner knowing, I was more and more interested in these 64 gates more than anything else. And if somebody's curious, you can go back on my Instagram feed. You can see that I started to write about these 64 gates with the transits for years. And I also
Mhm.
started to create infinity healings. That's the energy healing modality I have been practicing for each gate as well. Because I felt that all the wisdom is really in those 64, I call them now genius archetypes, actually,
Yeah.
is in there. And I even found what I had learned about the types, the 5 types we have in human design, which you also know, I call them now archetypes,
Mhm.
because I saw that in certain gates, I find these archetypes again. And I started to realize that, well, not only manifesting generators can be multi-passionate, right? It's not this black or white kind of thinking, which I think we humans easily have.
Mhm.
And it was really also then with those gene keys that really broadened or went into more depth with these 64 archetypal energies. And as I started to share with my clients also, as I was speaking in my Analena way about the gene keys, they all were oh my God, can you talk more about it? Because I can understand it when you talk about the gene keys. For many people, it was hard to understand, just like it was for me in the beginning. So I started to write and talk about it in a more practical way, and of course also combine it with what I knew from human design. And yeah, and then at the end of the day, you create your own version that is for the people that are drawn to you, right? I think it's,
Hmm.
yeah, sharing the message with more people. And since then, I really, when I look at a human design chart, because when you have a gate, right? Like let's say you have gate 14 in your human design chart, I, because I have worked with them for so long now, I don't want to say I memorized them all, but I know them pretty well, to be honest, by now. So I always weave in also the gene keys knowledge, even in the human design readings. And it just has really taken it to such a deeper, more powerful level that I absolutely love. And it's just like the gene keys are really enriching the human design experience for me. And it for me, it belongs together, because it's not like this is human design and this is the gene keys. It's more like, yeah, they have grown out of each other. And I mean, Richard Rudd, he used to be a human design teacher in the
Oh,
beginning.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. He actually, he knew Ra. He was one of his students. He was the guy in the United Kingdom that was doing all the human design stuff. He even wrote several books about human design.
Oh,
And
wow.
at some point, I don't know the exact story. I think he wanted to integrate it, but there wasn't like agreement with Ra or something. And then he just did his own thing, which I think was really meant to be
Mm,
brought about the gene keys, because in the gene keys we don't have any types, right? We don't have the
right.
5 human design types. So yeah, it's that's why I loved listening to his talk, because I think I needed to hear through his story, and I love stories, by the way. That connection also with how it all evolved out of human design.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had no idea that he knew Raw and that he used to work in human design.
Yeah.
But I mean, I completely agree with you about the gene keys enriching the human design chart, the human design experience, especially from the way that you read my chart. Because, we did a human design reading and you really looked at both my tropical and my true sidereal chart, but just the fact that you pointed out, gate 5 for me is activated 5 different times in my true sidereal chart, which is in the sacral center. It's something that I would have never looked at because, you
Mm.
know, in my true sidereal chart, I'm a projector
Yeah.
and my sacral is not defined. So I wouldn't have really looked to that center, but you were like, this is actually super prominent for you, especially with the energy of gate 5. And then the programming partner is really important for you as well, even though you don't even have that activated. It was really, really insightful and just a really unique way, because I've had many human design readings before, and it was a very unique approach that I really appreciated, and I got a lot out of it.
Hmm.
So I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, and that's also for me with human design in general. I mean, we have all this information in the books, right?
Yeah.
We have the 5 types, and we have the center defined and undefined and everything. But I have learned over the years that we are all here to bring our unique essence into the world. And even when I started human design, of course, we are beginners, right? And all we know is kind of replicate the information. But then over time, when I did actually human design readings and I just followed the common knowledge,
Yeah.
I started to get tired and really drained in readings. And I was like, something is wrong here. And I kind of took a step back, and I also started to notice, what am I attracted to? And I was really always attracted to anything that's unique, intuitive. And because I never had booked a reading for myself until one time, one of my mentors or colleagues, she offered intuitive human design readings. I was like, yes, because I don't want to have this. I already know all this stuff. And if somebody's just going to tell me what I can read in books about my human design chart,
Yeah.
I want something about me and Elena, right?
Very true.
So at that point, I gave myself permission to do human design readings completely, literally freestyle, intuitively. And of course, I I had known a lot already, especially those 64 archetypal energies. You know, I had known about the centers and the archetypes and everything. But instead of just like going through a laundry list of so-called facts about the type, which again, if you think about it, you know, we have then 20% of people are projectors. Are they all going to be the same? Not so much. And
Mhm.
it's also about the person. Like, I want to get to know you before I even look at your chart, you
Yeah.
know? And so my approach has become 100% intuitive, which obviously is based on information I've taken in at some point and I've, you know, turned into, yeah, deep wisdom through my inner knowledge and how I see, because I think I see human design very different from many other people.
Yeah, it sounds like you really developed and evolved as you've gone on. And I would totally agree with that because when I was reading human design charts, that was my problem was I felt like I was just reciting information to people and I had the same exact experience as you in the beginning where I was like getting so drained and it kind of just turned me off to human design completely a little bit for a little while. So it's really amazing. Oh, I don't know. Sometimes it does the
Let's put the thumbs up. I love the synchronicity because we're talking about what we don't want to do. We don't want to just replicate information, and the thumb went down. And then
Oh yeah.
so it's like the universe, exactly, guys, don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was having the same like originality is something that I really value both in
Mhm.
myself and in people that I work with, and it seems like that's a big value for you as well. And you definitely bring that into your work, and I totally agree. Like you have a very unique way of approaching and viewing human design, and one of the aspects of that is the fact that you mentioned, and you have mentioned already, you know, you view the five types as, you know, the five main types for those listening: manifestor, projector, generator, manifesting generator, and reflector as archetypes.
Mhm.
And you're the first person I've ever heard talk about it in this way. So can you elaborate more on what you mean by that?
Yes. This also came about because literally I was on podcast and they asked me, "Can you talk about the 5 types?" And it so turned off my cycle. And I was like, "I'll never do this again."
Oh my
So
goodness.
yes. So yes, we have these 5 types in human design, and you guys can Google them. You can read them
Yeah.
in books. I'm not gonna describe to you all the specific what should be true for everything single one of these types. But as I went through my own human design experiment, this is actually very important to emphasize. Human design is an experiment. I think we forget it. It's not here to tell you what to do or what you can do or to box you in. This is simply giving you some options to play with. And then you get to decide, okay, this feels true to me or this doesn't. So you're more empowered, right? And what I started to see is that rather than empowering people, there was a lot of talk about how they actually felt limited about their human design. So, I'll give you some examples. I heard people say, well, I'm a projector. I cannot work. Or like, I don't have energy. Or people telling other people like, no, you cannot initiate anything. Only I can do it because I'm a manifester. Like, you need to wait for me to tell you if, and then many generators felt very disempowered because they felt like, yeah, I'm just here to work for everybody else and work my butt off. And I said, whoa, okay, I think we're going in the wrong direction here. It was just a very interesting observation. And then I started to also see, again, from my experience, so I learned I'm a manifesting generator, right? But I also super always resonated with a projector, like super duper, because I always felt like I'm so good at guiding people. I also felt that even though I have a defined cycle, I could totally relate with their total down cycles where I feel for some time I totally have to rest more. And then I have times where I have this amplified energy. And I also learned with the different centers, if it's defined or undefined, it's not this black or white thinking. It's always a combination of everything. And it's just about how you learn it. And I also could relate to the reflector. I'm a super highly sensitive person. I thrive the most when I spend more time in nature. And I need my alone time. And then I could also relate to a lot of things from the manifester because even though I'm now I'm actually a generator in the True Sidereal. I'm very much in this responding, right? But I initiate a lot of things. And I find actually we initiate in response. Initiating never comes from the mind. Even when you're manifest and you initiate from the mind, it doesn't go very far. And I really could relate to all of the types. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And then I noticed that, well, it's just that whatever chart comes in my life, so it was first the manifesting generator chart, that's what I felt drawn to. I had no interest for True Sidereal anything in the beginning. I heard about it a couple of times, Sidereal, but I was like, no, this is tropical and I don't want to hear anything else. And it was my access point. This multi-passionate quality of mine was so important for me to embrace at this point that it came through the many-gen archetype for me. And then later on, as I gave myself permission with that, excuse me, I then had to embrace more of the qualities of a manifestor or of the projector, right?
Yeah. See, I think that that's a really everything you said resonates so deeply with my experience as well, because that was really what I needed too when I found my tropical human design, was the permission slip from being a manifesting generator of being multi-passionate, because I was a yoga teacher, I wanted to do nutrition, like I was like, I don't know how to combine things, but I want to do it all. And so it was very liberating. And then fast forward, but at the same time, I actually hadn't even heard of True Sidereal at that point. But when I discovered True Sidereal Astrology, which was 2023, early 2023, I was studying formally tropical astrology. And so I was just very immersed in astrology. And one of my friends was like, I brought it to one of my friends, and she was like, well, wait, how does this change the human design chart? And I was like, I don't even know. I was like, I don't have the capacity to like even think about that right now. Like, I'm just so immersed in adapting and learning my astrology chart. And then when she went down a rabbit hole and was researching and found Richard from like Cosmic Human Design, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it changes the chart." And I was like, I mean, I figured it would because it makes sense, but I was like, I'm not ready for that. And then it took me quite some time, honestly, until right around the True Sidereal Summit. I was starting to get pings because I had pulled my chart before and saw that I was a projector, and I was like, whoa, this is so different. And I was just not ready for it. And then I was getting like intuitive hits around it right before the True Sidereal Summit of like, it just kept coming to my mind, like my chart, my projector chart. And I was just kind of like, I don't know. Then I attended the summit and I was like, yep, I need to listen to this, my intuition here. Like, this is not a coincidence. And since then have really been learning more about my True Sidereal chart. And so I really do think it's like what you said, you get what you need out of it at the time that you discover it. And I think really listening to like, if you're not ready for something, don't push it. And I think that's where, all of these different charts can offer us insights into ourselves. And it's not this right versus wrong, viewpoint. And that's a really beautiful perspective that you bring to that, because I'm sure you've experienced in the space, there's a lot of, both astrology and human design. It's like, no, it has to be this way. Right.
Yeah, we have a lot of black and white thinking,
Yeah.
and this is something. So there is the 17th Jinki, which the shadow is opinions, right? And the gift is farsightedness.
Mhm.
And I feel that's a quality that actually has always come very easy to me for some reason, and sometimes it's actually challenging because I can see so easily the full spectrum. Like, yeah, it can be cold and it can also be hot, and there's a transition and it's going to be warm in between. And it's kind of the same with the types. Like, well, you can be manifesting generator, but you can also have qualities of a projector and a little bit of a manifestor. And
Mhm.
again, it was through these 64 gates or archetypal energies or gene keys that I learned this. And it was also one thing from the Gene Keys itself that actually opened me up to this more expansive view of, seeing how these archetypes can overlap.
Mm.
And it was at the Pearl sequence from the Gene Keys at the very end. Richard Rudd actually talks about it, and he calls it the biggest joke of all. And he was like, well, even though you have this Gene Keys profile, because in the Gene Keys you have these specific Gene Keys, right? Which you can also find back in your human design chart in some of the gates. And he said the biggest joke of all is that at the end of the day, all 64 Gene Keys apply to all of us because we all have them in our DNA.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, exactly. Because before I heard him say it, I was kind of like, well, I'm maybe going a little bit too much against the grain and maybe I'm a little bit too open-minded, But when I heard it from him, I mean, he has so much incredible wisdom, right? I was like, okay, I think I really need to trust myself here. And yeah, that's when I really went more in. And this was before or very closely when True Sidereal found me, because I had started to not use the word type anymore. I started to call it archetypes and like, hey, we need to see the human design chart in a little bit different way than just looking at the type, because you're so unique and you can be so different, even though you're a projector and you're a projector, right? And then kind of already, you're probably going to ask me how True Sidereal came away, but it was through clients. So one of
Mm.
our clients was like, in a mastermind, was like, hey, can we talk about sidereal? I said, yeah, of course. I mean, always being open-minded. And we actually had one of our students teach us about sidereal, what she learned from regular sidereal astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fascinating. And I was like, I started to feel for the first time in my gut, woo, yeah, this is exciting, because I started to get a little bit bored with the regular tropical, I guess. And I was tired of this like extreme talk, because there's a very hardcore human design community, like you say, where, I mean, you have people fight about it and you cannot be this or that. And I can feel every gate in my body. And
Mm-hmm.
that also turned me off a little bit from the human design community. And I really got out of all of these groups, and that's why I kind of created my own world with human design.
Yeah.
And I really unfollowed a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I learned about the sidereal astrology, I started to get interested to do my research. And I went online, I went into YouTube, and that's when I also started to find there was one girl, I think her name is Tan Astrology, and she talked about actually the different versions when you use tropical, when you use sidereal, and then she also brought in True Sidereal and cosmic human design.
Yeah.
I was like, very cool. And I really resonated with how she was talking about it, her energy. And she also had this now, being more connected to nature now and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then of course I found True Sidereal Astrology with Ethan Chimenti. That was the first time that actually astrology resonated with me, because I was deep into human design and Gene Keys, but I was never too deep into astrology itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed from this moment, because I was an Aquarius sun in tropical, and I had read my chart actually twice from wonderful astrologers. And the readings were great, but something felt a little vanilla to me, or felt a little bit off,
Mm-hmm.
if I was being fully honest with myself. And when I pulled my free first astrology chart on Ethan's Mastering the Zodiac website, wow, I was like, it was like, okay, I have no more questions. This is it.
Yeah.
Especially because, so I have mostly air signs in tropical, which is awesome. I mean, I like to talk, I have a podcast and everything, but I have this deeply grounding energy on people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one feedback I get all the time, like all the time. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, maybe there's something wrong with me, because I'm so grounding. I should be more like, quite up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So when I pulled my True Sidereal, I actually have a grand trine in air and tropical, and now have a grand trine all in earth signs in True Sidereal. That's when I was like, yeah, okay,
Wow.
I don't
Yeah.
even need to talk about it. And still, my North Node is in Gemini. So I still have some of this air element there, but it's really deeply grounded in this more earth sign essence for me. And it just feels so much more true to who I am, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, because I love math and I wanted to for the first time, really understand, okay, how does astrology really impact the chart? And I very quickly understood it. I was like, oh my gosh, of course, everything changes. And I was like, people are going to have an identity crisis because just with one little gate of a difference, you can become a projector from a generator just like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so interesting. And it really validated my inner knowing already that I had this much more expansive view on the types because
Mhm.
there's such still black or white thinking. Even when somebody says, like, I have a defined or undefined sacral, it's being seen as black and white, but you have
Mhm.
to see how it interconnects, you
Right.
know? And it's not that, oh, if you have it defined, you have energy all the time, and you have it undefined, you don't have energy. That's not what it means at all. We
Yeah.
are all here to become wise about the energy of the sacral center, which we all have access to, which basically means, in a shortened version, we are here to do what lights us up, where we have this gut yes feeling. When we say yes to the right things, we will actually receive energy more for those things. When we
Mhm.
say yes to the wrong things, from people pleasing and thinking we have to, or from pressure, we can do certain things, but we get burned out pretty quick. And we can all get burned out, not just projectors and manifestors, right? It may happen a little bit quicker if you have it undefined, because it may be more challenging for you to tap into this energy. But the overall essence of a center is the same. It's not this or that, it's this and.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. I'm almost wondering, it's like why were we even divided into the five types, you know? Like,
Well, that's actually a really good question because I have then also, because I got more curious and I went back and I started to research more and I found a lot of people that knew Ra, they knew the beginnings of human design. And guess what? There were no types in the beginning. There were no five types.
wow, that's interesting.
And there actually, when you look more at the gates and the channels and the splits, that's really all you need to fully understand a chart. And at some point, many, many years later, all of a sudden, apparently Ra came up with these types to kind of simplify it, to market it in a better way. So my guess, this was more
Wow.
and again, this is my Analena perspective, not here to judge, right? But what it really feels to me, it was a move to commercialize human design more, to make more money with it. Because let's be real, we humans, we like to belong, right? And I do find with these types, we can easily like, yeah, I'm in the Manijan tribe, right? Or yeah, but then when we go against each other, I find it super sad because then it can create hierarchy and like, oh, this type is better than the other. That happens with our human ego, right? So easily.
Mhm.
And that really turned me off. And even though I had mentors tell me like, well, it's better if you just focus on one of the types because that draws more people in. And I ran a program for managers and was super successful. And even as I was teaching it, I was like, I can teach this to any type. It doesn't matter what type you are. And it's super powerful because we
Yeah.
talked a lot about slowing down and again, trusting yourself. That's incredibly helpful for everyone, not just for manifesting generators. But I guess when you talk about the type, the beauty here is that that's how you connect with people because they
Mhm.
feel so seen in this, okay, I can be multi-passionate, but then you open it up. So I have found that, yeah, the types are very actually beautiful from this archetype perspective and to connect and find the right kind of people. But then still the way I teach is always very comprehensive and like, look, you can be anything. It doesn't really matter, you know?
That is so fascinating. I mean, I had no idea that it was something that came out later on, and it honestly makes sense to make it a little more digestible
Yeah.
to, more people. Because even now, I mean, human design is obviously it's picking up, but it's still not super, super well known. Um, so that's really fascinating, and So I'm curious, like, what would you say then are the most important points to, like, if you can't even give it a blanket statement, or do you, of like what the most important points are to look at in a chart? Just because, like, from the human design world that I was so deeply immersed in that I've like since pulled back from,
Mhm.
they've always been like, all you need to really do is embody your strategy, which is based on your type, and your authority. And then, like, all of your chart from there will just fall into place. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I find there is some truth to that, but there's also not, because there are always two sides to the coin.
Mhm.
What that really means to me, following your strategy and authority for everyone, for every type, for every single human, is like, get out of your head, drop into the body. And look, the mind is not here to make decisions. The head is here to ask questions, to be curious, to wonder. But decisions happen on a more visceral body level, right? Where it's like what feels right into your body. So it's about really trusting yourself. And the yes for me always feels like it's this grounded, expansive feeling, but it's not this like, oh my God, I'm so excited feeling, because you can very
Mhm.
easily misinterpret a yes, right? When we
Yeah.
just amplify other people's excitements or emotions. And the whole thing with a strategy and authority, because so for example, I have sacral authority, and then you have a manifesting generator that has emotional authority, and then they're like, oh well, but I don't have a sacral response, right? And so I had to always go like, no, we all have a sacral response. It's just
Mhm.
it's also another emotional wave. And again, through my experiment, and from having worked with hundreds of clients, I have also come to the conclusion that we experience all of the authorities we learn, all of them. So, to
Mhm.
give you an example, I think we all have a gut response, or a response, how does it feel in the body? We all at times have a need to talk things out. This is something we typically associate with a mental projector.
Mhm.
And you can be a generator and have an ashna defined to the throat, and you feel partly very much like a mental projector, even though you're a generator. So there are other times where, so for example, even though I have sacral authority, when I make big decisions, like where I invest a lot of time, money, energy, resources into something, I better slow down, because I can actually amplify other people's emotions and excitement, or I can fall for pressure from around me.
Mm.
A highly sensitive, empathic person. And if I were following the book knowledge of human design, this only applies to people with emotional authority.
Right.
And I have found this absolutely not to be true. It applies
Mhm.
to all of us. Actually, people with an undefined solar plexus are even more susceptible, because I can pick up all these emotions, and I need to get into my own space to really feel in my body, what is this grounded yes or no, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, that's again, and this is an experiment. This is not like, oh, you have this. And of course, then I learned with the True Sidereal, and also because I have studied the gates so deeply with the transits, that our chart constantly changes.
Mhm.
Yes, you have your birth chart, but if I go now by True Sidereal, my chart is completely different, especially the centers I have defined and undefined. And if I get so attached to this one way, well, I'm a little bit screwed, to be honest.
Mhm.
And one final thing, the very foundation of human design and Gene Keys is the Chinese I Ching. We have here the 64 hexagram. The I Ching is called the Book of Changes.
Mm.
So we have created, especially in the human design space, this very fixed mental concept that goes so much against nature, that there's always change. And when you can also allow yourself to see how your perception and how you take on energy in the world and how you commune with other people in the world can change over time, I think that's really what freedom is. And look, I'm a person, I've always loved variety. I just get bored if everything is just the same. And Yeah, so I really think that human design, the way we still have it in today's world, in this little bit cookie cutter way with these 5 types, and very strict this, and no, you can't, and da 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 da. It serves a purpose of bringing up the ego in the world,
Mm,
really
yeah.
bringing up the shadows,
Yes.
and bringing us back home to like, yeah, this more God consciousness where we can embrace all the different facets of what it means to be a human and what it means to be in alignment with nature.
Yeah. But it's like this more unified approach and perspective
Mm.
instead of dividing, because like we kind of mentioned earlier, there is a lot of division
Mhm.
within even just the astrology space of the
Oh,
different
yeah.
it's
Very
and
interesting.
it's interesting, and I went through my own experience with that where I was like when I found True Sidereal, it just resonated so intensely with me that I was just like, I don't understand why people are still doing tropical, and I didn't get it. I didn't like take it out on anyone or anything. I
Mhm.
just was in my own process. And
Yeah.
then, you know, and then it was really the True Sidereal Summit that I attended, that you hosted, that it just really opened my mind and really helped me to understand and just accept like everyone is doing whatever they resonate with at whatever time, and there literally is no right or wrong. And I think that yeah, so anyways, it was just very very eye-opening and really liberating in that sense as well. And the nature aspect is really interesting too, because
Mm.
that's something with, I believe, for me, true sidereal astrology is very congruent with nature as well, because even the sun seasons, like they shift a few days every year because, the earth's rotational axis is shifting. And so it's just very being allowing yourself to be very fluid with things, which allows for evolution. It's very important. And so I think that you're really bringing a very innovative but very important approach to all of these systems. I mean, human design especially. And so, what was your experience in learning your different charts, like between for human design, between your tropical and your true sidereal? What was that experience like for you?
It was actually very smooth for me because I started to over obsess with my chart so much because, like I told you, I'm so much more drawn to these 64 archetypal energies. They have all the wisdom for us, and it's almost like you can pull a card like a card deck and just which card today has a message for me. But for me, like I shifted to being a 5-1 generator from a 2-4 manager and tropical. And I started to realize how the 5-1 was very empowering for me to step more into my role as a leader.
Hmm.
Because the 2-4, I felt a little bit more, let me hold me back and always wait for people to reach out to me, very much projector energy, right? And I I found it also really interesting to notice that even myself, there were certain things in my human design I did unconsciously use to limit myself, right? Or not to fully play out the way I could have, but somehow this 5 line gave me that permission to go out more and step more into that like thought leadership with how I really see human design with everything. And then the generator energy was more because I still have, for example, gate 34 in my chart, and gate 34 is for me the archetype of the manifesting generator.
Mm.
So even though I'm a generator, I still consider myself a multi-passionate person. Like it didn't go away. But with the generator archetype now, there was this message for me. Okay, Analena, go a little bit deeper, start to have a little bit more focus. Which I totally knew I needed that. And
Hmm.
so over this last year, I've really seen it. I've started to focus more, and I'm now very focused on the true sidereal in human design, right? Like I still read your tropical chart if you want to, but my main message has become True Sidereal. That's also how the True Sidereal Summit came about. And obviously, you guys reaching out to me left and right, that has been such a beautiful confirmation from God universe. So thank you so much for that. Because the amount of messages I have received since I started to talk about my journey with, from tropical to true sidereal has been overwhelmingly beautiful. And
Mm.
so many people literally coming almost out of the closet and like, oh my God, thank you so much for talking about it, because many of you have been having this knowledge already for years, but there has
Yeah,
been a little bit of fear to kind of go against the grain.
100%.
And I think somehow my role here is to just make it cool, make it normal. Like, what's the big deal? Like,
Yeah.
this is something to experiment with. And just because it's what I think, even what I'm saying right now, you guys, like, please come up with your own truth, right? This is
Mhm.
how I see it. You may see it differently, and that's okay. You know, we're not here
Yeah.
all to agree with each other. I think that's very boring, you know? And I think it all teaches us so much about respect and acceptance of self and others. And just because I now I'm so into the true sidereal of my chart, another thing is I have an undefined throat, which I resonate much more with than the defined throat in my tropical chart. That's probably the biggest difference there. Um, is that, you know, I cannot expect that everybody's now where I'm at. And it's also totally wrong for me to say, like, oh, you guys are all wrong now because you're following tropical. I was with tropical for over 4 years.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you're going to always stay with tropical, that's totally fine. If that feels true to you, that is serving your highest purpose. I truly believe it. If that what resonates most with your body, please do that. If you want to play with both, if that feels right to you and working with your clients, please do that. If you feel totally called to go all in and only on True Sidereal, please do that.
Yeah.
There is no, like you said, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah, I think that's so important to really just listen to your inner guide around that, because I really struggled with that in the beginning because I was just immediately through my intuition and my body like catapulted into true sidereal. It was quite interesting for me. It was a very drastic shift
Mhm.
where once I found it, I mean, I had a very visceral response in my body when I found it. It was kind of freaky. Like my whole body was like tingling.
Mhm.
And I've never really had that experience around something, but it was like this undeniable truth. And I had to really sit with that and really battle my ego. And I didn't understand because there weren't people talking about it when I found it. it
Mhm.
there I mean I hadn't found your work yet. This was like beginning of 2023 when I found it. And for months, I was, like, in the closet with it because I was
Mhm.
too scared to talk about it because I was like, at that time I was following all these, like, really well-known tropical astrologers, and I had asked my teacher, my tropical astrology teacher, I was like, "Hey, have you heard of this?" And she was like, "Yeah, I've heard of it, like, it's a perspective, that you can, approach astrology through." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what?" And so I went through that where I was like, I was so scared to start talking about it because I just was like, I didn't want to be attacked and I didn't want to be like told I was wrong, even though it was my truth.
Yeah.
And, then I gave a reading to one of my friends and it really resonated for her. And that's actually what gave me the confidence to step out with it. But it really is your own individualized experience because for me personally, I am all true sidereal when it
Yeah.
comes to astrology. It's just the way that I'm meant to use it, I believe, and how I'm meant to help other people with it, you
And
know?
and this is look like in the Gene Keys we have this concept of the soul fractal, right? You can only really attract your soul fractal when you're in your essence, when you're in your truth, right? If you're
Mhm.
diluting it, because it comes from a fear of rejection, right? A
Yeah.
fear of having people criticize you. And then we're actually not being of service as much as we could be because just like you feel this deep body visceral truth for true sidereal, there's a reason for this. I really believe like God makes you feel this way for a reason. Like you're an extension of God, right? And you are meant to bring this essence into the world so that the people that need exactly that can find you.
Mhm.
And I also, because for me, it's now what's, as we're recording this is still January 2025. So it was almost exactly a year ago that I actually recorded my YouTube video about my journey from True Sidereal to Tropical. And it was one of the videos that got the most like engagement and likes and everything, like far compared to everything else I did. And I was also like, so excited. And I don't know why I was kind of in a childlike energy and having fun with it. Like for some reason, even though I always have a big fear of rejection, I didn't care. I was like,
I love that.
for some reason, always in human design, I have felt the leader in me. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, with the 5-1, it then took it to the next level. But I never hold back. I was like, even though I'm a newbie, I can do this. I know this. I always felt like I just remembered it. It was already there, even without studying it. And I did have fears because my whole business was built on tropical.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna think now I'm crazy, and my business is gonna go down the drain because now she's switching things, and I'm gonna have the whole human design community against me or something. But I just had to follow the calling, because when I really understood, because I'm a math nerd, I have always loved math in school, and it's like, just look in the sky. I mean, we have such a twisted distortion in tropical. For me, again, not to make this wrong, but for me, it's just,
Sure. Yeah.
it's like, this doesn't make sense, guys. Like, you can argue all you want, and I'm okay if that's your truth. But for me, it's just, it's not,
Yeah.
and I can see how this was the foundation for us to get us to True Sidereal, and I'm so thankful for it, because without the tropical, I wouldn't have found the True Sidereal, right?
Right.
It's part of this evolution, but I also have to give myself now permission to let that go, so I
Yeah.
can fully focus on where my energy is needed, and
Mhm.
I'm always about how can we align the most to our true nature, to our true essence. And that to me is like, okay, let's just look up, right straight into this,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
obviously Ethan Chimanti's work is so profound. He has a wonderful video on his website, Mastering the Zodiac, about the rotation with the ecliptic, and
Mhm.
how we have this 72, 1 degree shift every 72 years in the sky,
Mhm.
and how he had this profound experience over 12 years ago. And yeah, it just felt, yeah, of course. And it's so simple and easy, actually. I think
Yeah.
it's too simple almost for us, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so powerful to hear you talking about it, and just really, yeah, emphasizing that inner call, and letting your path, for anyone listening, like letting your path be your path. Like it can be different from both of our paths, and just really seeking, like being open to the information, I think is just the most invaluable thing in this whole experience. At least it has been for me personally. And
Yeah.
so, but I'm with you on just all of the true sidereal. It's just so straightforward for me. It's just how it is. And so, we have to listen to that.
Mhm.
So, oh, this has just been such an amazing conversation. I'm your work is just so profound. And so I'm so excited to just share this more with my
Mhm.
listeners. But
Thank you.
I did want to talk about a few of your areas of expertise.
Mhm.
One of them being the magic of slowing down to enhance productivity and well-being. I mean, for me, honestly, learning about my projector, chart, it really did give me the permission to be, because I was stuck in that, like, oh, but I'm an MG, like,
Yeah.
I have to keep going. And, you know, now I've really been embracing the slowness. And so, how do you work with your clients on slowing down?
Yeah, I have a very untypical approach also in coaching, because we live in a world where we're so distracted, right? We're
Mhm.
constantly chasing, we're trying to find the answers outside of ourselves. We put other people on pedestals and everything because we don't trust ourselves. And I cannot even become aware of all of this unless I slow down.
Mm.
And I always was a person, even as a child, I used to always be really fast, walking fast, eating fast, always like fast and rushing through everything. And that wasn't good for me. So it came also obviously from I needed the message like, Analena, slow down. And the more I slow down for myself, the more I allow my clients to slow down. So I always have a more slow paced approach also in my programs, where there's more time for integration, there's more time for reflection, more time for pauses, because that to me is the only way how we can connect to our inner truth, our inner essence. Because when we're rushing, we are more in the world of information. There's so much information. This is already inner knowing from other people, already things that, with AI these days, like information is so easily accessible. And we always think like we need to know more, we take on more information. And we're actually disconnecting from our own knowledge, from our own inner truth, which is also in human design is the knowing circuit from the individual circuitry, right? And we can only access this when we slow down. And you find it in almost every single gene key and human design gate, that unless you slow down, you embrace really present moment awareness and stillness and solitude. Obviously not all the time, but on a consistent way, that's how you receive the clarity. That's how you receive the inner knowing. That's how you also, like, if I'm not going to slow down, I don't even know what my sacral response feels like.
Yeah.
Because I cannot really get out of my head unless I really slow down and I allow myself to just perceive all the busyness that's going on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think slowing down is a lifestyle that, everybody will benefit from embracing. We could talk about just that for hours.
Right.
But my podcast was first called The Art of Slowing Down, and now it's called The Magic Pause. Because, all the teachings, again, that are the foundation of my work are grounded in these principles of slowing down, of pausing. Even the gene keys, the art of contemplation, is about pausing. It's this act of like, so let's say you say something to me and I get triggered, like she said something, I don't like it. And then we react, right? And then we create more turmoil and bad energy and we feel worse. And there is just, not much progress here. And we are more in the victim state. But if I can actually, even though I get triggered, I can slow down and I can pause and honor how I feel and ask, what am I here to learn? What's the message here? And then instead of reacting, I can make a choice to respond from a place of love, not from attacking another person, because we easily come from our wounds, right? So the entire deconditioning we talk about, the inner healing, does not happen without slowing down. It's really the foundation of everything. And so transformation with my clients, the majority of my clients, I want to say all of them, they mostly come to me because they have tried to chase all this success, right? To follow all the cookie cutter models and hustle and grind their butt off. And when they come to me, we work on unbecoming all of it and letting go of all these mental concepts so that they can connect to their true essence and start to create or build a business or a creative adventure, however you like to call this, that is really in alignment with who they are. And that is not something that I can tell them how to do it. I can just guide them into this. It's so hard for us humans to slow down.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're so right. This could be a whole nother podcast episode, but it really is. I mean, that's something that I've been stepping into in my own way is that slowing down and noticing, when I'm making decisions from a frantic nature. Because like you mentioned that earlier, it's like our decisions should come from this very, calm state. And then it's also like the slowing down, it really connects us back to our bodies, which, as you were mentioning before, it's like it doesn't matter what type you are in human design. Every single person benefits from like the whole point of human design is like getting out of the mind and into the body, no matter what type you are.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we're wrapping up on time, but this was just such an insightful conversation. Like I am so, especially after having our, I did my human design reading with you, and then honestly, this conversation like brought it even more together for me,
Mm.
and just so many insights. And I'm so grateful to you for coming on and just sharing all of your wisdom. How can listeners get in touch with you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, thanks for asking, and I'm so happy to hear. So Instagram is where I'm mostly active in terms of social media, Analena.Fuchs. I'm sure you're going to put it in the show notes.
Hmm.
On my website is also there, my email you can drop. And in terms of working with me, so I do offer readings, right? Mainly I do now True Sidereal, Human Design, Gene Keys readings, or a blend of it. And I'm also really excited to share with you guys that I'm actually launching a certification in March of this year, which is going to be called the Intuitive Human Design Teacher Training and Certification, where I'm really teaching everything that I have been talking about today because, yeah, people have been ready for it. People have been asking me about it, so that I'm really fully teaching my whole approach, which is very intuitive. And it's really helping you get into your own unique essence of bringing human design in a more empowering way into the world, and really guiding people, not from this place of just going through this list of what's here for the type that is actually draining you, because that's not going to get your clients results. Let's be real.
Right.
I've had so many people come to me for readings. They also told me, like, yeah, I had a reading, but it was just kind of this very general advice about the type, but it wasn't really specific and unique to the person. And,
Hmm.
anytime you have a session with me, and that's obviously what I teach my clients as well, I mean, this is a loaded coaching transformational session. It's not about throwing information at you. So because that's the thing with human design. Like, there's so much information. And when we just focus on this, we're actually not living our design at all, because we're so much in the head.
Yeah.
You're not going to figure out your chart in your head. You have to live it. You have to embody it. You have to
Yeah.
experience it. And so this happens through slowing down, happens through also integrating powerful coaching and deconditioning practices, right? And really using this whole system in a more holistic way. Um, yeah, so obviously that will also be a journey for the people going through the certification to embody their design more, and then become really empowered teachers and guides to, yeah, really get this message out into the world in a much more empowering and more transformative way. So people more and more people live in their essence. I think that's really how we can change the world in the most profound way. Because you and I, right, even though we are both into True Idea, we're so different. We're going to be so
Yeah.
unique, and we can
Hmm.
never do anything in the same way. And that's beautiful, you know?
Right.
And I think we need more in this world. And there's going to be more and more, I really feel like, a demand, especially for the True Idea, because more and more people are waking up and, being able to work with different charts. I think most people are not be able to do that because they have such a rigid understanding of human design. And yeah, so that's coming. Also gonna give you the link for that so people can check it out. So I have a podcast course right now that's postponed until probably August of this year, where I also work with human design and Gene Keys and help people launch podcasts. So that's the only other thing I do besides human design and Gene Keys, also helping people specifically launch podcasts, because I love podcasting. I think it's one of the best things you can do for your own, growth
Yeah.
journey. And also, if you want to make impact in the world, share your message. I mean, it's such a beautiful tool to connect with your audience. So yeah.
Wow, so many amazing things. And that is so needed, the intuitive human design reader training, because I really do believe that human design is very needed as well. And just like the approach that you're taking is even inspiring me of like, oh, maybe I can start to incorporate what I know about human design in certain ways. And because it's funny, I actually got guidance about that once from an intuitive. Like, she was like, they keep bringing up human design. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not doing human design anymore. Like, I'm done with that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so this is just kind of interesting for me. It's got my wheels turning a little bit. But it's needed. And so I'm really excited for that. So all of the links will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for being here, Analena. This was just such an amazing conversation.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for listening and having an open perspective. And yeah, thank you so much.